The fact that gaming was an activity that was only confined to two locations is baffling. The first place that comes to mind where one could experience the digital frontier back then is the arcade. With a pocket full of quarters or nickels and someone willing to give you a ride on the weekend, you could experience the magic that games like Mortal Kombat, NBA Jam, or X-Men vs. Street Fighter had to offer. That is, unless you were hoarding tickets for the most valuable prize on the counter. Let's be real, you're not getting 250,000 tickets in one arcade session, and you need help.
Stop it. Get some help.
Games weren't just an arcade-only experience, though. A select few gas stations had cabinets along with convenience stores, or so I hear. That was just a bit before my time. But every once in a while, you or your friends may have gotten to unbox a home console for Christmas. And if your parents really had money like that, possibly your birthday.
All jokes aside, many of us were able to create core memories and everlasting friendships because of home consoles. They were the best way for us to decompress from a stressful day in 3rd grade, right after learning new times tables or the cursive alphabet, with the side order of reinforcement homework. And if you had cousins who had consoles and you had sleepovers with them, you knew you could expect 3 things. 1, pizzas on the menu. 2, there'd be a plethora of snacks. And 3, you better not be the first one falling asleep, otherwise you miss the boss fight you guys have been grinding so hard to get to, and you'd most likely get drawn on with permanent marker.
That doesn't mean the home console experiences were without their drawbacks, though. One of the worst feelings was when you knew bedtime was approaching, and you were so close to beating that level you've been struggling on for a few days. The last thing you wanted to hear when you finally reached the final boss was, "It's past your bedtime. Turn it off." Man, the way our souls would sink knowing any request to stay up later would be immediately denied. Sure, we could leave the game on so we wouldn't have to enter in a long-ass password to continue where we left off, but that would require us to block the power light somehow and have the TV off all day until we could return to it. I don't know about all of you, but my parents weren't that dumb. They would have made sure that thing was off. So a pencil or pen and paper were kept close to our consoles growing up. Yes, I have siblings, so they were our consoles. Another struggle with console gaming. If you did in fact have siblings, you'd have to share. Now the sharing part isn't a big deal, but the unfair amount of time my brothers or sister would play during their turn would always feel significantly longer than the time I was allowed during my turn. Comment if you feel the same way. I know I'm not alone on this. Whether it was the sharing aspect, or the fact you never ever seemed to have enough time to satisfy your gaming needs before you had to go somewhere. I know at some point every gamer grew up thinking, I wish I could take my gaming console with me. If only there were a console, TV, and controller that could fit in my pocket. Then I could play whenever and wherever. Enter the era of handheld gaming. My name is Kawande, and these are my favorite handheld gaming consoles. From the Mattel Electronics LED Sports handhelds released in 1977 to the modern options of the present, these portable gaming systems were every gamer's dream come true. No more having to pause the game and turn the TV off, hoping it was left alone until you could continue. Gone were the days of actually going to bed after shutting off your Sega Genesis for the night, and here were the late nights playing your Game Boy under the covers with a flashlight into the early hours of the morning. The restraints of gaming in the arcade or at home on the family TV were finally broken, and gaming anywhere became our new reality. I was fortunate enough to experience handheld gaming while it was alive and thriving. Now that's not to say it's dead. It's just not as prominent, and we'll get to that, but let's back up a bit. In the early 90s, there was no shortage of games to play on the Game Boy. 1,046 games in the library to be exact. I personally never had the original Game Boy, but my older brother did. I'd be glued to Andre's shoulder like a second head, amazed at the fact that Donkey Kong Land was right in front of our faces. Sure, it was a green screen with black pixels, but with a bit of imagination and familiarity of the graphics from Super Nintendo's Donkey Kong Country, it felt just as good to play. As a matter of fact, it felt great to play, when it was my turn, of course. Given the classics this game console had to offer like Tetris, Pokemon Red and Blue, Metroid 2, Return of Samus, and so many others, the memories of long road trips, late night boss fights, and turn taking began to pile up. Not all of those memories were good ones either. How about when you're deep into a gaming session and the lighting in the area became too dim? Your free-range gaming session came to a screeching halt. Backlights on these things were not yet considered to be a necessary piece of hardware, and instead was sold separately as an accessory in a few different versions. Then there's the issue with having to stuff the back of the console with 4 AA batteries. 4 of them. It wasn't so bad back then, because batteries only cost about 30 cents each. but they only last for about 10 to 14 hours. If today's gamers were faced with the same issue, they'd be spending some pretty pennies to keep their Game Boys running. Technology will always have its limitations, no matter what time period.
The only artifact I have of the original Nintendo Game Boy is this Lego build that my wife gifted me not too long ago. And it's a sick replica that I'm proud to have, but maybe one day I'll go out in the real world and see if I can find it and add it to my collection. I did, however, have the successor to this great piece of gaming history, the Game Boy Color. On the morning of my 6th birthday, right before my older brother and I walked to school, my dad surprised me with a brand new, still in the box, Game Boy Color that came bundled with Pokemon Yellow. And man, when I tell you, the excitement was at an all-time high the whole day. I couldn't wait to come home from school, crush my homework, and rip open my brand new handheld console. Plus, my brothers and I were avid Pokemon fans at the time, so Pokemon Yellow was the perfect fit to add to my gaming collection. And this is truly where my gaming collection and obsession first started.
The former issues I mentioned with the original Game Boy were somewhat shared with the Game Boy Color. That means you had to buy accessories from either wholesome or greedy companies to be able to play in the dark again. The battery life, however, received an upgrade. The AA battery powered one lasted more than double that of the original Game Boy. 15 to 30 hours? That's more than we could have ever imagined as kids. The battery life you would experience on the GBC also depended on the brightness setting, volume, and however complex the game was. Games like Shantae would give us that 15 to 30 hour battery life, while games like Survival Kids or Mario Tennis would limit it to the lower end of the playtime spectrum. Just like our previous console, the Game Boy Color could only do so much. It's sad to say, but the Game Boy Color is another lost artifact to me. Though I had once owned one, I have no clue where it ended up. I can only hope whoever has their hands on my previously prized playable pocket-sized possession is either enjoying it to the fullest or that they have placed it neatly into one of the finest display cases to expose the glory it holds. The new millennium brought with it a couple new advanced handhelds to play with. See what I did there? If you didn't, you will soon. The Game Boy Advance was released on March 21st, 2001 in Japan and June 11th, 2001 for the States. Not only were the cartridges smaller than those of the original Game Boy and the Game Boy Color, but the Game Boy Advance also offered us refreshing graphics in 32 bits. Now, my experience with the Game Boy Advance is limited in a way that I'd occasionally play or watch my brother Tyler play Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland and Super Mario Advance 4. You might know him as Slacker. Dude's been gaming forever. Go check him out on TikTok. And we play games from the first gen Game Boy to the Game Boy Advance. Oh yeah, that's right. One of the coolest things about the GBA, yeah, that's right, I'm starting to throw acronyms your way. Gotta keep you on your toes. The GBA offered backwards compatibility. This was an awesome feature, as long as you didn't mind having an older game protruding outside of the natural shape of the Game Boy Advance. I mean, look at this thing. You had to be so careful not to hit this eyesore on anything while you're playing an older game. That is, unless you wanted the display to look like a shitty Etch-a-Sketch drawing. Anyway, Nintendo was making strides in the handheld universe with more compact and innovative consoles. With the Game Boy Advance having 1,020 games available to play in its first year of existence, the sky was the limit, or so it seemed. This console was still limited to using disposable batteries, and there was still no backlight for the screen, unless, of course, come on, say it with me, you should know this by now, you bought the accessories that fix this issue. Sure, it's convenient to have a screen light and a magnifier clip for your Game Boy Advance, but why the hell did we need that in order to make our gaming more enjoyable? It should have already been included. The battery life of AA's along with its processing power was reduced drastically by 2/3 of what the Game Boy Color had. You'd only get about 4 to 6 hours out of your console before you had to change out your batteries. Talk about pay to play. I guess batteries need their security too though. If only there were a rechargeable version of this masterpiece. No need to worry though, because a couple years later Nintendo released a special updated version of the Game Boy Advance. On Valentine's Day in 2003, the redesign for the Game Boy Advance, the SP, was released in Japan. The States didn't see it until March 23rd that same year. Oh, and in case you're wondering, the SP stands for Special. I honestly never knew until doing research for this video. I can't believe I've gone this long without knowing the truth. I mean, I usually look stuff like this up, but anyway, you learn something new every day, right? The Special was unique in many ways from its predecessors. For starters, it's the first Game Boy with a rechargeable battery that had 7 to 10 hours of playtime on a full charge. No more spending money on those AA copper tops. It also was the first widely released Game Boy model with a fully lit screen that was adjustable. And it was about fucking time. Accessories sold separately and not necessary to keep playing in the dark or dimly lit areas? Sign me right up. Just don't let me get busted playing late on a school night. For about 3, maybe 4 years, the Special had me in a chokehold. There were only 2 handheld devices that could snatch my attention away from my captivating black SP. The Nintendo DS, which came out on November 21st, 2004 in the States first and released a month later in Japan. And then we have the PSP, which came out in Japan on December 12th, 2004, and then in the States on March 24th, 2005. My 2 youngest siblings, Haley and Hayden, were lucky recipients of the Nintendo DS one Christmas. And although I had played a couple Mario Kart matches or helped them pass through tough challenges on Cooking Mama and DK Jungle Climber, I have no deep ties to the DS. My wife even has one. I swear I have nothing against the DS, I just didn't play it as much. Maybe that's a shame, but we'll get to why in a bit. Did you know the DS both stands for Dual Screen and Developer System? The former meaning obviously reflects the fact that it has a dual screen display with the one near the control buttons being touch sensitive. The DS even had a stylus that came with it that you could use to interact with in certain games. Though, I know most people prefer to use their fingertip instead. Come on, don't lie. We all did this. The latter meaning of the DS
Developer System
was a clear indication that Nintendo wanted to provide a platform for game developers to create more of their own unique gaming experiences on this console. Talk about enabling a community to make change.
The DS is another rechargeable battery-powered system that had 10 hours of life before needing to be charged. The games also came in these cute little cartridges too. They're sleek, convenient, and way too damn easy to lose. We had to find a proper way to store them. Now, I'm sure there are countless favorites that people could effortlessly list off when it comes to the DS experience. But for me, there's only one great to ever grace me with its existence on the DS. Oh yeah, I doubt you can name an anthem better than that. Flipnote is unmatched.
While my 2 youngest siblings enjoyed and created core memories with their Nintendo DS's, my younger brother and I were among those kids who got to experience the magic of the PSP. With the 480 by 272 resolution and a widescreen 16:9 aspect ratio, we were able to experience other worlds in great detail. We took turns playing God of War Chains of Olympus, God of War Ghosts of Sparta, God of War, just kidding, that's not a real game, Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops Plus, Ratchet & Clank Size Matters, and so many more. We had endless hours of fun and stories to enjoy. Actually, don't quote me on the endless hours part. The battery only lasted 4 to 6 hours. Higher definitions and deeper storylines come with some kind of price, I guess, but the PSP didn't even stop at gaming. The PlayStation Portable had the ability to connect to Wi-Fi, so you could browse the internet, or even download videos and music onto an external SD card. You could also buy movies to play on the PSP. The first handheld console to be able to play movies? What kind of space-age new generational shit is this? Well, technically speaking, the physical media used to experience the glory of the PSP were none other than UMDs, or Universal Media Discs. These were what the games and movies would come installed on, unless you purchased them on the PSP Digital Store. RIP, you will forever be missed. Just like the rest of these consoles we've talked about though, there are always pros and cons with each one. And we're starting off strong, or weak. Take your pick. If you were to have a first-year release PSP from 2005, the battery won't likely hold a charge anymore. For all those collectors out there, you're going to have to either buy a new third-party battery or rebuild one. Not too big of a negative, but I definitely don't recommend rebuilding one unless you are or know a battery engineer. We don't need any more freak fires or puffed up batteries making an appearance anytime soon. Another thing that would knock the PSP down a peg would be how loud the UMD format can be while loading the content. Here, take a listen. And it has yet to happen to me, but the UMD drive will eventually fail. Fingers crossed I never see the day. Lastly, the PSP requires proprietary memory. Now, again with the technicalities, what that means is that there is only one particular type of memory stick that you could use to save your game data and other content in order to access it on your handheld. What memory stick would that be, you might be asking? None other than the Memory Stick Pro Duo format. No standard SD cards allowed. I feel like I'm slightly nitpicking here with the proprietary memory, because either way you'd have to pay for one to play with one. All in all, the PSP showed us a glimpse into the future of handheld gaming. It showed us that it was indeed possible to create unique gaming experiences in high definition, all within something you could play and view in your hands. It paved the way for consoles like the PS Vita, Wii U, and a little while later, the Nintendo Switch. Now these are all great consoles in their own right, and whether good or bad, they helped advance gaming to where it is currently. Maybe I'll make a video talking exclusively about those consoles in the future. Let me know if you'd like to see something like that. But back to our point though. Even though these consoles had something to offer the world of gaming, I have no experience with the PS Vita, limited experience with the Wii U, and I don't really consider the Nintendo Switch to be a handheld console, but more of a console that switches from slightly portable to home console. But I guess that's the beauty of opinions. What's your take on it? And with that question posed, it's finally time to talk about what are, in my opinion, the greatest handheld gaming consoles the world has to offer. We're talking about powerful devices that are easily portable with great battery life and screens that lure you in from a distance. We're getting spicy now. My bad. You thought I was talking about these? Allow me to clarify. I'm talking about these pocket-sized emulator consoles. Now, I know what most of you are probably thinking. Now, what power could these wannabe Game Boy clones possibly possess that the newer Steam Decks and ROG Xbox allies don't? Let me elaborate. While these may look like they're an attempt to mimic a console of the past, they actually are indeed such consoles. They represent consoles of the present and the future as well. Let's take a few steps back and I'll explain further.
This is the Powkiddy RGB20S, my very first and probably most favorite handheld emulator. Now, I want to brag about this, and I'm going to try my hardest not to sound like some bullshit AI-generated ad. There are plenty of reasons to flaunt what this thing has got, and I'm going to focus on the key aspects that have won me over dearly.
First of all, the nostalgic shape and look of this thing reminds me of those long road trips and airplane rides. Those late nights trying to beat my latest reach level or high score. When I pick up my Powkiddy, I'm transported back to my childhood, back to the first time I fell in love with gaming. As if that wasn't enough, the Powkiddy RGB20S comes out of the box with over 20,000 games to choose from. Yeah, you heard me right, 20,000 games. You can play those classic arcade titles you made countless memories with, minus jamming the quarters into the slot to continue whenever you get a game over. You finally have the option of revisiting those old consoles and experiencing the adventures they hold from the NES all the way to PlayStation X and Dreamcast. Not only is this thing jam-packed with all the games I remember playing growing up, but I finally have a chance to play all the games I never had a chance to experience back then. I can play through cult classics for the first time and see how far gaming itself has evolved. And back to the 20,000 games bit, it comes installed with that amount of games, and based on the size of your SD card, you can always add more. Collect them all if you wish. The only limit is the amount of storage space that you have. The main reason I truly value my Powkiddy RGB20S so highly, though, is because it is one of the greatest gifts I've ever received from one of the greatest people in my life. My wife gifted this to me on Christmas almost a year before our son was born. And when I booted it up for the first time, my hands were glued to the controls and my eyes felt no need to drift away from the screen. You see, video games, as you probably can guess, they're a huge part of my life. Mac, my wife, acknowledges this and also has those games that are near and dear to her heart. One of those dear games is Crash Bandicoot. Crash is one of the first things we related to and bonded over, and from there we've been inseparable. So for her to give me this time capsule of a machine that includes some of my childhood favorites, games I have yet to experience, and the first game we ever talked about with each other is a testament to how great of a gift giver and attentive person she is. I am indeed a truly fortunate man. Thank you so much, my love. We all have our favorite games, consoles, handhelds, and the memories that come with them, and to me that's what makes gaming so magical. Whether it's because that game you played back then was an absolute piece of trash that you were able to make hilariously unforgettable memories with, or it's a next-gen continuation of a series you grew up playing through, we as gamers all have deeper ties to certain titles and machines than we could ever fully describe. I plan to continue to revisit the old and make new gaming memories with all of you through my channel. And if you've made it this far, I truly appreciate it, and I'm glad to see we have something in common.
Thank you for letting me share my handheld gaming memories with you. I hope it made you think back to your handheld gaming days. What are some of your favorite memories from back then? Let me know. Until then, I'll be trying my best to beat Metroid 2 Return of Samus on my Miyu Mini Plus. Wish me luck. And finish that backlog of games you have before you buy a new one. I'll be here when the screen reads game over. See you later.